Right, well, it's 2 o'clock, so we'll get going. So welcome everybody to this extraordinary meeting of our Infrastructure Committee today. I'm the Chair, Gavin Bartlett. I've got councillors Cox, Tucker, Deputy Chair Ferguson, Guy and Deputy Mayor Smith for the committee here. And GM Tony Avery to my right, and our governance support Matthew to my left.
Barry online.
Oh, yeah, I've got Barry online watching. I think he's not on the committee, but he's taking an interest in this, which is great. So the meeting's being recorded. It's not live streamed, but it will be on YouTube later, and we're also being recorded for audio for Radio New Zealand today. So now, so we've got no apologies. Any declarations of conflicts of interest? No, good. Thank you. No matters lying on the table today. Confirmation of agenda. I will move that the agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Smith. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? No, carried. Thank you. So that brings us then to the main business of the meeting. Item 1, additional parking restrictions under the Traffic and Parking Bylaw of 2018. I'd like to invite staff to the table, Monique Barnes, Senior Civil Engineer Transport, and Marie Day, Community Partnerships Manager. We're presenting the report. The purpose of the report is for the Infrastructure Committee to consider new parking restrictions in the Queenstown CBD, specifically Park Street, Lake Esplanade and Glenorchy Queenstown Road. So I'll hand over to you both to present the report.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Thanks for having us here today. I will take the report as read, but I'll just provide a brief summary of what we've put forward in the report. Since January, we've seen a significant increase in long stay or overnight parking on Park Street and Lake Esplanade. We've received a number of community concerns and complaints about that, and officers have also seen the number of vehicles on those roads. This report is really to propose a restriction on the lakeside of each of those roads for no overnight parking or no stopping between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. This is to allow still some overnight parking options on those streets, but to really allow more traffic movement and turnover to ensure accessibility of those car parks. The third item there, the Glenorchy Queenstown Road restriction proposed is more of a safety restriction. Monique, did you have anything else you wanted to add? No. So we're just here to answer any questions, and anything of a technical nature Monique will be responding to.
Great, thank you very much. Right, anyone with questions? Okay, thank you.
So, firstly, to acknowledge that we've received an enormous amount of correspondence on this issue, and acknowledge that there's a massive inappropriate adverse effect on the residents of those areas. So, but I just wanted to understand if we were to block on Park Street, particularly the parking on the lakeside, is there any indication of how much residents parking is involved in that? And equally, if we were to take option 2 and do both sides of Park Street, how many of those parks are likely to be affected residents, and would they even be available to residents if we didn't prohibit that overnight as well?
I haven't got the numbers with me, but there are significantly more car parks down the lakeside of the street than on the inside parts of the street. And we've acknowledged in the paper that it's hard to predict, the outcome of these changes, but we acknowledge that still might mean there are long stayers on the inside parks. The number of residents, but what we're proposing will mean there's a significant turnover of cars on the lakeside, which should allow residents to access more of those car parks. Admittedly, it's probably not going to be a complete solution.
But not overnight anyway.
Correct. Correct.
So what I'm trying to establish is if we block both, well, not block, but prohibited overnight parking on both sides of that road, are residents likely to be impacted by that significantly? Or do they mostly rely on on-site parking and things like
We don't have that data.
Don't have that
No, that's something we would have to investigate further if we were going to.
that. But presumably if we displace those on the lakeside, the campers are more likely to use those parks, making them unavailable to residents anyway.
Potentially, again, that's hard to predict. There are already changes occurring on the street, but we're still seeing a reasonable number of people staying there longer term.
And if that was the case, we're finding there were adverse effects, would it be possible to reconsider the residential parking permits for residents in that area?
That is something we're looking at in the parking strategy and parking management plans, is just for this to do something this quickly. The permit scheme is going to take a bit longer to roll out.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an interim measure, but that's definitely something we're looking at.
So hypothetically, it's possible to take option 2 to prohibit overnight parking on both sides of Park Street, and at a later time institute resident permit system on part or all of that street.
It's just the duration, I guess.
Yeah.
We wouldn't recommend necessarily taking all parking away, because that will be a much longer process. So would be.
Why would that, in terms of physical signage and stuff, or
It's,
just,
no, it's not, we'd have to go out for consultation for permit scheme and ensure that we can't just.
oh, sorry, for permits,
Yeah, for
but
permits.
we could choose option 2 today to prohibit overnight parking on both sides of the road. Okay.
So what you're saying is that then at some point in the future, there could be the option for a permit system. Obviously, you said it would take longer to implement
Yeah.
that, but.
And equally, if a freedom camping bylaw gives us the tools to manage it, we could then adapt the restrictions again.
Yes, we are trying to treat these as two separate issues, though. This is as a parking issue. Freedom camping issues are more appropriately dealt with through the freedom camping bylaw process. So, yeah.
I did mean to say at the start actually that the business of the meeting today is purely about parking and issues that have been caused by long-term parking. Some of that's perhaps attributable to freedom camping, but freedom camping is a separate issue which will be dealt with separately this year. So we are purely focused on parking issues and proposed restrictions for those to alleviate those issues. Lyle. Oh, sorry, Tony, did you?
No, just in response to Councillor Smith, and other comment I make is that leaving one side free for parking might give residents who are there more longer term ability to park some of their vehicles or out in front of their properties, as opposed to no opportunity at all. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Lyle.
Just to chair this question on the, can you explain why 10 o'clock, 10 p.m? What's the rationale for the time?
We had a discussion with the roading team about what might be an appropriate time, and also with our enforcement team. Basically, we were looking at still allowing use of the town centre, but also ensuring that by 6 a.m. in the morning, so we looked at both ends, at 6 a.m. in the morning, that is a high use commuter street often, or has been in the past, so that it's clear of vehicles for people that might be coming into work in the CBD. But it was a decision that based on a discussion with a few people that work in this area.
Okay.
So that can be modified, I suppose is what I'm saying.
And I'm not sure it's really relevant. How far away is the next? What's the next lot of unconstrained parking in the streets? Is there another street nearby with unconstrained parking or not?
Do you mean just with the
Unlimited parking near to Park Street? I'm just trying to remember what's down there.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult to see what the impacts. It's going to have some impacts, but it's difficult to say exactly where. That's why we've looked at where we think the longer term parking is likely to shift to try and mitigate it, but we'll have to see what happens and then just.
It's sort of interesting how Brisbane and the Hobart streets sort of naturally stop, so they're separated from the lakefront, so they're probably less appealing. I suppose Adelaide and Suburb Street are most likely to be targeted at that bottom end, but
They're quite steep though.
yeah, well, that's what yeah, that's right. Well, that's
talking about that issue, but
no, it's true.
I had another question just on the Esplanade. The two options here, one is to stop on the lakeside, the other option is stop both sides, but why would you stop, why is there a need to restrict the parking on the town side and not on the Esplanade rather than just the lakeside in option 2?
Sorry, could you ask that?
In option 2,
Yeah.
it talks about restricting parking on both sides. Option 1 is just on one side. What's the rationale for option 2 going for parking on the inside on Esplanade? I can understand Park Street. I'm just trying to understand. Option 2 could be no parking both sides of Park Street and only lakeside or Esplanade. You put both sides of Esplanade. I'm just trying to understand why.
Yeah.
Well, really, it was just to provide those two options to the committee, but you're right, that could be a third option in the sense of both sides on Park Street, one on Lake Esplanade, but we haven't put that forward.
That would just require us to amend 2A, but not 2B.
Yes.
So, yeah.
No, I'm just trying to understand. I thought it might be okay. Thanks.
Yeah, just through the chair, we know that Park Street is more of a recent development. Just looking at the Glenorchy Queenstown Road, we seem to have tolerated that for a long time, haven't you? You agree?
I can't answer that question, I'm sorry, but there was a discussion with the transport manager around adding that section of road in, that based on the fact that we could get some displacement of vehicles, and there is also already some behaviour occurring on that stretch of road which is unsafe, and it was an opportunity to, I suppose, deal with that issue.
And to be clear though, the Glenorchy Queenstown Road restriction is at all times because of the safety issue of people parking there.
Really, yeah, no, I understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you, if I can, through the chair. So Glenorchy Road, no time at all, and the 1 mile car park's 240-minute time limit, is my understanding. Yes, correct. And then, so I've been trying to get my head around as far as Park Street goes, and looking at our issues of low vehicle turnover. I was looking to understand how the parking there does serve our community when it's not occupied by occupied vehicles, let's say. And I suppose to pick up on Councillor Cox's question around the 10 PM bit, because my thinking on this is high use as workforce parking. I just have a little, and I understand why, from a, you know, my mum always says nothing good happens after midnight, but, you know, maybe between 10 and 12, one of the things I'm thinking of is our hospitality workforce, and the fact that our buses finish at 10, whether there's, I understand why 10 is perhaps more workable from an enforcement point of view and other considerations there. And I suppose I'm just validating my own thinking, because I went from going, should we be considering a time limit equivalent to 1 mile where it's 240 minutes on a cycle to keep that turnover happening and still creating input to the CBD, but then cancelled that out of my own thinking of going, how is this parking serving the community? It's really serving the community through having a place that has longer duration, and I'm assuming that there is no time limit outside of those hours. Correct. Yeah, so I guess the sticking point I came from was, how do we make sure that somebody just doesn't park up all day and still have impact on our environment in a negative way? Is that something that we could undertake around not using our lake waterways in those ways? Or how would we actually stop someone just parking there all day and still having occupied vehicle behaviours that we're not wanting to enable? And are we creating any barriers for our workforce that may finish after 10? If they're hospitality workers that have no other way to get home after those buses finish.
Through the chair, so there's a couple of questions there. The first part around environmental impact. Again, this is to address parking issues around accessibility and turnover of parking. What you're talking about will be addressed through the freedom camping bylaw. That isn't something this proposal is attempting to resolve. We will continue our communications with anyone down in that area, the signage we're installing around respecting that area. It's an education piece will continue. And your second point there regarding workers, again, this is one proposal to manage a current situation. It isn't going to necessarily resolve all parking challenges in the CBD area. So that hasn't been investigated as part of this proposal.
When we say there's a lot of parks that multiple days, weeks, and longer, is any of that resident identified parking as far as people that leave their vehicles for longer time or parking other things like boats or trailers? Or is this really evidenced by it being overstaying of parking through occupied vehicle use?
Probably the second option, because we were specifically looking for that information through our summer ambassadors, you know, actively going down that street, Park Street in particular, but also Lake Esplanade most days, particularly through the last couple of months of the summer season. It's again, we haven't done a survey of residents to find out how many of them are parking their vehicles on the street. So we don't have that data. We are going with some observational data that we've gathered.
And we've heard from our residents in the area, as one of the councillors acknowledged. So my assumption there is that there's resident support around removal of parking on an overnight basis. Have we explored the consequences to that of residents not being able to park their vehicles overnight? Are we feeling that we've got community on side with us on that?
Based on a range of feedback we've had to implement some sort of restriction from the community, there is an appetite to see some sort of restriction. Whether this has some unintended consequences of still meaning that some residents can't access parking, again, we'd have to see how the restrictions work. However, at the moment, we are aware that a significant amount of the parking is already unavailable to residents because of the behaviour of long stay parkers.
And so then we have that concern as if we, and I'm only talking about Park Street here, if we do maintain parking on the other side of the street, are we just shifting the situation across the road? What's staff feedback on that?
Again, through the chair, and we have addressed that briefly in the paper. Again, we'll likely see some displacement of the vehicles that are on Park Street and Lake Esplanade if these restrictions are put in place. The volume we're seeing on those streets is probably the biggest issue that we're talking about here. Again, we can't predict what that displacement might look like. We will be educating and reminding those that are on the street about accommodation options in town, other things that they could be considering rather than parking on streets around.
So it's suggested we've got about 90 parks on the lakeside of Park Street. How many are on the other side? Do you know?
Do you have a number? No.
Would it be similar?
It'll be a similar amount.
No.
It's significantly less.
It's
Maybe a
because-
dozen.
Because of property access ways.
Yeah, it's maybe a dozen.
There's already parking restrictions on the hillside of the street for quite a length of it anyway, so.
As far as time restrictions and that stuff.
No,
That's not a
you're talking about the inside of the Park Street. Yeah, no, much less parking on that area.
Thank you.
I mean, I would like to suggest that we do go to option 2 on Park Street and retain the other ones on Esplanade and the like. And the reason I think we just have to be firm, and there will be a certain amount of displacement if we don't. So, yeah, and this problem is just the rate at which this problem is getting worse and has rapidly evolved. We need to take firm action, and if it doesn't work, we'll just have to evolve it. But I think we do need to be firm. It's just completely unacceptable. It's understanding that the issues are different, but the current parking situation on Park Street particularly is unacceptable.
Okay, anyone else got any other questions? I've got a couple. Relating specifically to Park Street, but the parking that's installed around the gardens area of Park Street, I didn't get a chance to go and look at it, but what are the limits on those parks? Are they time limited? or-
4-hour parking.
Is that only till 6 o'clock at night, or is that?
Correct. So, yeah,
So after 6 o'clock, they're open.
correct.
Right, and then the other one question I had was Jubilee Park. There's a small car park at Jubilee Park, which is potentially off the road reserve, might be on the reserve itself. So what restrictions apply to that in terms of opening?
It's actually partly on the reserve and partly on the road reserve. We did have a look at that. At the moment, there's no restrictions on that.
No, that's good. Yeah, okay, that's right.
So just while you're on that, so can you use the reserve there or not, or is it?
We did discuss it, but it's a bit untidy because it's partly on the reserve, partly.
But this would cover that if we impose to both sides of the road restriction.
Yes, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Or would that be restricted though?
If that's what they're
Because
saying, yes.
it's a separate sort of car park, 90 degrees to the road. I don't
Yes,
know
so
whether
We
that would be covered
treat
by.
it the same as road reserve.
Yes, I agree. I think it would probably be treated differently because it's not.
I mean,
It's not in the road.
speak up about some people banking here as well.
Yeah, I think it would be treated differently because it's actual 90-degree parking. It's not parking within the actual road.
Okay.
Reserve, did you say so?
That's partially on reserve, but it sounds like partially on the road reserves. Yeah. And in terms of if these new restrictions come into place today, how would they be enforced? Do we have people monitoring and enforcing after hours and between 10 and 6?
We will.
Got carried on the back there too.
Yeah, we currently can do that under our current budgets that we have, so that we undertake those patrols already.
Right.
Can be done.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Karen. No other questions? Thank you very much for presenting that. So we've got recommended resolution. Quentin has proposed a slight amendment to that, so
Yeah, well, I'm happy to move that on the basis that we move 1, 2 with A on both sides of Park Street and B, C, same, C, 3 and 4 the same. So it's just an amendment to 2A to allow both sides of Park Street.
can we put that forward as the,
Yeah, we can just move that as amended motion if that's appropriate.
okay, I'm happy to put that.
Well, I'll put it to
Okay.
someone wants to second that.
Well, I'll read it out then as I see it being worded. So the resolution that's recommended to us is that the Infrastructure Committee, 1, note the contents of this report. 2, approve the following parking restrictions. A will say no stopping 10 PM to 6 AM, Monday to Sunday on both sides of Park Street, Queenstown, between the entrance to the Frankton track and the start of the Queenstown Gardens. B, no stopping 10 PM to 6 AM, Monday to Sunday on the lakeside curb only of Lake Esplanade, Queenstown, from the corner of Beach Street through to the entrance of the 1 mile car park. And C, no stopping at all times at the start of the Glenorchy Queenstown Road, the lakeside shoulder between 1 mile roundabout and the start of the guardrail from route position 27 metres to 198 metres. 3, resolve that the above parking restrictions will come into force as soon as signage notifying the restrictions has been installed on these streets. And 4, note that if approved, a review of the parking restrictions set out in attachment A and B will be presented to council or the infrastructure committee prior to November 2025. So Quentin has moved that. And do we have a second? Councillor Ferguson. Now, any debate? Anyone want to say anything? Comments?
Say stuff. We've received, thanks for sending through submissions around this issue. It's overwhelmingly that there's an obvious problem. And support addressing it appropriately. It's gonna be reviewed anyway in November. I think if we're gonna do it, might as well do it properly. So happy to support the recommendation as Councillor Smith has put forward.
Lyle?
Yeah, I echo that comment. I agree with what Councillor Smith said, go hard on this one. been a lot of publicity on it, the residents aren't happy, and if there is any, I think any disruption to the residents from this is must be a lot less than what they're experiencing at the moment, so I'm strongly in support of it.
Lisa, do you have anything?
Yeah, and as demonstrated by my questions, I really tried to look at how is our community actually wanting to use this parking, and we put a time limit on it to create that vehicle turnover, but have really acknowledged the use and value of having some longer daytime parking. I know that I've still got a little bit of concern that 10 o'clock, while it might cause some inconvenience for our workforce, I appreciate that anything after 10 of having a lot of movement and also requiring staff to enforce it in those later hours, diminishes the benefit of an extra half hour or hour being able to stay there longer. So I agree with other councillors. I think we need to really make this clear, and having both sides will stop the problem moving across the road. And I also back us leaving parking on the accommodation side of Lake Esplanade due to the accommodation of hotels there and requiring some more parking there. And I do also support the GY Road option. My only question or thought there was that there's no risk of moving that across the road, like they can't park on the inside of GY Road.
I wouldn't have thought so. It's debatable. I have seen cars parking, but
Yeah. So no, fully in support of that, and I'm hopeful that we haven't created unintended consequences for our resident community through doing this. But if we have, maybe that's something we can address through the parking bylaw at a later point. So thank you.
I'll go first, then throw to you, and then we can finish off with this final right. So yeah, I mean, for me, I've spent quite a bit of time in Park Street recently as well, looking at the various issues that are going on here. I think the end of the street that we're talking about, where we've got parking on both sides, there are very few houses there to begin with, and very few of those have residents living in them. And all of them have off-street parking. So I don't think there's much of an issue. I stand to be corrected by people who do live there, but it's not as much of an issue, I think, for resident parking at that end of the street as what we might think it is. The other end of the street, as we said, towards Frankton Track, has already got no parking on the opposite side from the lake. And it has been an issue. I mean, I've been down there on a Saturday morning and counted, I've told you how many camper vans and cars that I've counted down there parking overnight, and it seems to have, based on the feed that we've been getting from the community, it has got out of hand. And this is a method for resolving that with the tools that we have available currently to us. So yeah, I'm happy to support the motion as it's been put.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think we're rather spoiled here, really, aren't we? Because first off, addressing the unintended consequences, I'm sure they're going to air themselves at some point. But this is another, for me, another highly valued aspect of our visual beauty, where these residents live in the area that we're talking about. So as what we have now, what we want our residents to tolerate, and going by the photos shared and taking a quick walk myself recently, down Park Street, dare I say it, for me, it has shades of Woodstock about it, which for me is totally unacceptable. So I agree with Councillor Smith, Deputy Mayor Smith, that I feel the need to go hard here on this one. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, only briefly, only just to say that this is a product of scale, in that our district has twice the demand for freedom camping and van camping as any other district in the country. If it was a small number of vehicles, it wouldn't be the case, but if the numbers that we're getting just are so disruptive to the normal functioning of the urban environment that we have to do something. So that's all I've got to add. So, thank you.
Right, all in favour?
No.
None against, carried. That's very good. Thank you very much. That brings our meeting to a close, and I declare the meeting closed at 2:30.